Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are watching on planet Earth. Welcome, everyone, to the launching episode of IPMSDL new media content stream called Indigenous Voices. All the way from Kota Kinabalu, Malaysia. Let me introduce myself. I am Atama Katama, known also as Andrew Ambrose, living in Kota Kinabalu, Malaysia. And I am coming from the indigenous peoples known as the Dusun of the Central Valleys and Plains of Sabah, Malaysia. How does one launch an episode? Well, basically, this is an introduction episode to an upcoming series of live broadcasts. We are very proud today to announce that this launching episode is broadcasted live on social media, on our page, and streaming on your page as well. We want to tell you guys that in the upcoming series of our new show, we want you all to join the conversation. Join us by tweeting, by sending your messages, your photos, and your videos on Facebook, and do it through two very new, brand new hashtags. The first hashtag is Indigenous Voices, and that's what we are, using social media to broadcast our expressions, our knowledge, our concerns, and don't forget our wisdom, but ultimately the voice of our struggle. So use hashtag Indigenous Voices. And here's the second one, hashtag Unite to Win. Let me repeat that, hashtag UNITE, number two, win. Unite to win. So, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, indigenous peoples watching, and friends and allies of indigenous peoples watching in, let's get ready for the launching episode with my very special guest this morning. All right, let's get to it. Joining us live from Manila in the Philippines, I have for you Miss Beverly Longid. Hi, Beverly. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the broadcast. And how are you doing? And can I say, kumusta ka? If that's culturally correct over there? Please.
Hi, Atama. Good morning. It's good to see you. It's good to be with you after, as you said, 2 years. No, we haven't really seen each other face to face for 2 years now, and I'm so glad to be joining you in this launching of the first episode of Indigenous Voices. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our viewers, listeners from across the
Mhm.
globe. So yes, kumusta ka is culturally
Oh, fantastic.
appropriate. It's how are you in Tagalog, no? So let me introduce myself first, Atama, because some of them might not know me or have not seen me yet. So I'm Beverly Longid. I'm an Igorot, belonging to the Bontoc Kankanaey from the Cordillera, Philippines. That's at the northernmost tip of the Luzon Island.
You're
Oh,
wearing something fantastic, and every outfit design and weaves
mm-hmm.
of our indigenous people have a story. What's your
Mm-hmm.
story of the items that you were wearing this morning?
Thanks, Atama. I also had too much because you yourself, you're wearing a very colorful and beautiful attire, the weaves and the necklace that you're wearing. Well, anyway, my shirt, my blouse is was a gift given to me by the Karen in Burma, which I had the chance to visit before the military junta and before the pandemic, and we were able to visit the Salwin Peace Park, no? And we had very wonderful conversations with the community in relation to the role of indigenous peoples, the role of the Karen in the national peace process that was happening I mean, that's still happening, but unfortunately, because of the what do you call this, the coup, yeah, it has not progressed, and it was a very interesting discussions because we wanted to look into the experiences of indigenous peoples in the Philippines, even in Latin America and other parts of Asia in relation to national peace processes. The necklace was given to me by our friends in Guatemala a few years ago. Then I was fortunate to be there to introduce our organization, our platform, the International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation.
We know many of our indigenous communities are still challenged in terms of internet access, use of mobile gadgets, and even like today, we have some disruptions of technology where we are getting strong, weak, fluctuating internet connectivity, which has forced us to go pre-recording, and this is the recording version. This actually proves that the challenges that we are going to face in a long time coming, especially in our communities, is this internet access. So right now, Beverly, in terms of the context and information that will be shared in Indigenous Voices show, what's the challenge of our grassroots community members in terms of their internet access and their use of mobile gadgets to get our show and to come in to our show as well? What's your thought on that, Beverly?
I do agree with you, Atama. No, this is a very, very big challenge, especially in this time of pandemic when everything goes online. As you mentioned, it's an issue of knowledge on technology, on internet, on the internet use. It's also knowledge in relation to the gadget. And then you also have challenge in knowledge in understanding the use of these different applications online. Because before we were only used to, sending short messages and calls via mobile phone. But now we have this live stream, broadcast, and everything. And then, of course, I think the issue is the availability of this technology because many of our communities do not have internet. And then if they do, many of our communities do not also have electricity. And these gadgets have to run on electricity, or even if you have batteries, you have to be charging this. And then, of course, all of these do not come free. I mean, it's paid. So in a situation where people do not have jobs, where because of many what do you call this, mining activities or everything, our livelihoods are disrupted. And now with the pandemic, the even our produce, that we normally sell in the town centers, we're not able to travel. So it's also a problem of the cost. So indigenous peoples by themselves are one of us data, both private and public data would say, are one of the poorest of the poor. And then what complicates this situation of poverty is the situation of discrimination. So in this situation where supposedly governments are giving aid or support to communities in lockdown, I mean, in many, many cases, is that indigenous peoples are excluded. So we don't get that aid. So that's the situation that we are confronted with at this time of the pandemic. Not to mention that also in many indigenous communities, we are in a situation not only of lockdown, but we're in a situation that our communities are militarized. Our communities, our organizations are vilified and red tag. So put that all together, it
Mm-hmm.
makes Indigenous voices drowned
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
practically not included in the conversation. And that is what we try to bring in through Indigenous Voices, our program that we
Mm-hmm.
try to make it regular as much
Mm-hmm.
as possible.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very important element in the broadcasting of
Mhm.
real information from the ground. Think of it this way: Indigenous voices may be so challenged for the
Mhm.
fact that even our communities are under technology lockdown. If you think about it, no internet access, no government support for access to internet facilities and technologies. And what about using of mobile devices without any subsidies and support and aid during the time of pandemic? How could indigenous peoples at the grassroots be able to express their voices? But the thinking behind Indigenous Voices as a program is very fresh. It's very contextualized to the greater situation untold from our communities. So is that what we are going to be expecting to hear in the next coming episodes? The situation of how one community is not being able to tell their story because of a double lockdown. Lockdown because of COVID-19 and lockdown because of unavailable technologies. What's your thought on that, Beverly?
Well, of course, yes. No, I mean that's our idea, no, to bring in the people from the ground. It's quite a challenge also because as you mentioned of the limitations that we have to confront. Maybe some of the things that we can do is also record these communities or persons from the ground that we would like to bring in Indigenous Voices, because this platform will be quite different, no, Atama. We try to make it shorter, like probably at most an hour, and then instead of having 4 or 5 speakers, we'll try to bring in one so that we will have a full one-on-one conversation with our guests, and the guests can be, not necessarily people who are known, who are quite used to this platform. We try to bring in those actually who do not have, we have never
Mhm.
seen or never heard online. So it can be, a weaver
Mhm.
in his home, or a farmer while tending his fields, or an artist. It can be a child, the youth from 10 years old, and to talk about the things that matter, and the things that are not normally given attention by government, by government agencies, or even by intergovernmental agencies. So those are the things that we try to do, while we also try to make it as creative, as light as possible, so that will also be easily understood and appreciated.
I think definitely this sounds amazing and very exciting.
Mhm.
Is Indigenous Voices open to our audience requests or suggestions on who they want to see on their next episodes?
Definitely. We would like to hear all of your suggestions on how to go about with Indigenous Voices. So you can contact us in different ways. I mean, one is through Facebook, because a lot of people are in Facebook. So just contact us at facebook.com/IPMSDL. There's also this thing called Twitter. So you can also tweet us at twitter.com/IPMSDL underscore. Or you can do the normal email. You can contact us through info@IPMSDL .org. And we'll be glad to hear, of your suggestions. And of course, you can always make recommendations, like who would you like to see? Who would you like to hear in the next episode of Indigenous Voices? Please do.
That's a great vision for Indigenous Voices. And I
Mhm.
heard also this is part of IPMSDL's August month of action, where we are introducing two hashtags. One particularly is Unite to Win as the theme for the celebration of this coming. And it's just happening in a few days. The International World Indigenous Peoples Day celebration, or in short, IDWIP. We will talk more about that when we get back after this very short video. This is Atama Katama together with Beverly coming to you live from the Philippines and Kota Kinabalu with the launching episode of Indigenous Voices. We'll be right back after these messages. Hey, what's up? Once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you are watching. My name is Atama Katama. I'm your host for the launching episode of Indigenous Voices. And in the studio in Manila, Philippines, I have Beverly Longit. Welcome back, Beverly.
Well, hello, Atama. Good morning to you and to all our participants today.
Right. So this coming August 9, is a very big day for everyone all around the world because it is the day to recognize Indigenous peoples' rights. So it's known as the International Day for the World Indigenous Peoples. And IPMSDL, International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination, is bringing its month-long campaign under a banner entitled hashtag Unite to Win. Beverly, can you tell me more about Unite to Win?
Yes, Atama, thanks for that. In a few days, it will be our celebration of the International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples. Unite to Win, hashtag Unite to Win actually is short for onwards with our fight for land, life, and freedom. And this is what we would like to bring on, no? Not only for August 9 or for the month of August, but for the entire year, no? We have this is the second year of the lockdown and we have faced many challenges, no? But amidst many of these challenges, we also have many victories or many achievements that I think we will also need to share, not only to inspire us or to motivate us, but we also look at these achievements as a pushback to all of these challenges that we are facing. And I think it's just timely that Indigenous people still persist and we still desist.
Mm-hmm. What are the victories that you were talking about? Is it only in our communities or elsewhere?
Mhm.
Tell us what these victories are.
There are actually very many, if we look into all of these stories from the past few years. I think one very significant example would be in Latin America. You would see the participation of indigenous peoples in national protests, no? Not only on issues that simply affect them as indigenous peoples, but national protests in terms of social services, taxes. And we have seen this like in Colombia, where you have Minga Nacional participating in this national strike, wherein they would come in their numbers, joining other sectors that are also equally impacted by government policies. We have seen also in Brazil, no, who have been very active in their protests in defending their territories, that they were able to more or less stop, prevent, or delay the entry of mining companies in their territories, the American company Anglo America. And we also see this in Asia, like in South Asia, in India.
we have seen the participation of indigenous peoples in this very, very big protest against this three farms law, no, that will not only bring in, this a liberalization of agriculture, but it will also relax the requirements in relation to other investments, no, that definitely would impact on indigenous peoples. And early on, we were talking about indigenous peoples, our leaders, our organizations, our communities being vilified, being red tagged, or being accused as and terrorists in the Philippines. Many of our colleagues, many of our comrades are in jail because of trumped up charges, but because also of our mobilization and engagement with the legal system, we have successfully dismissed many of these charges. Windle, right? Windle Bulingat,
Yeah.
the chairperson of the Cordillera People's Alliance, was
Mhm.
his case of trump up case of murder and attempted murder was recently dismissed by the regional trial court. Of course, and many lots of stories, like even in very inspiring, of course, is the case of our brothers and sisters First Nations in the US and Canada, who were able to come out with a very coordinated protest for pipelines, oil extraction in their territories. Very inspiring also is that they were able to also bring in the narratives of indigenous peoples in relation to history, wherein traditionally October 12 or 13 would be celebrated as Columbus Day, which actually marks genocide against indigenous peoples in the Americas, but now it is now celebrated as Indigenous Peoples Day locally. Some of the statues of these colonizers have been brought down. So these are very, very big victories amidst a situation of pandemic.
Mhm.
And therefore, this should be shared
Mm.
so that people can be inspired, people can learn from these experiences and probably make some modifications or adopt this in their own struggles, and then bring in bigger victories, not only in their communities, but probably we can do more of coordination, more solidarity so that we have bigger and wider victories for indigenous people.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yo, you know what I think about this? This is the reason, the main
Mhm.
reason now to be in solidarity together, to share the meaning of these victories by celebrating it wherever we are. This is
Yes.
the first time I'm hearing very detailed information being given to us on this show today. What more? During the time of these past 2 years, we haven't been able to hear full details of this because it's a very harsh time. It's a time of crisis right now. So definitely these victories must be seen as measurements for us to celebrate at the global context of solidarity. You know, we always say when we gather together as indigenous youth, when we come to the Philippines or we come to Chiang Mai, we have this chant which goes, "Long live indigenous peoples, long live
Only
international
international solidarity.
solidarity." And
Yes.
there does exist international solidarity today, whether
Mhm.
online, whether on Facebook, whether on TikTok, because all our stories of victories, maybe they are defragmented into various contents. Some are edited for TikTok. Some are edited
Mhm.
for longer news stories. And the common one is the text message and posting on Facebook. So there's so many contents out there. Now, talking about contents and themes, if this
Mhm.
was based on last year's theme, which is called "Reclaim the Future,"
Yes.
and I can only think now how our Native American brothers and sisters pulled down the statues
Mhm.
of the colonizers there, reclaiming the future. this year is Unite to Win. So please tell us what's the outlook on how Indigenous people struggles are taking shape during the pandemic and during right now. Bev.
Yes, it's true, no? From reclaim our future, now we are able to, from a theme of Unite to Win. Definitely, the highlight skill of the theme will focus on land, because that's very important for Indigenous peoples. It will focus on life under a situation that we're under attack, and it will focus on the theme also of freedom. Maybe let's try to cut it up, no? When, of course, land, because even at the time of pandemic, plunder has not stopped. In fact, they have governments and corporations have weaponized the pandemic to a point where they are able to successfully operate, no? And we have seen this from Africa to Latin America to Asia and everywhere. And in fact, it's worsening. No, we have, because of the pandemic situation where people cannot go out in their numbers to protest. People actually do not know what policies are being enacted, and that's something that still that we need to look on, because in a situation of lockdown,
Right.
plunder has not been locked down. It has to stop. Second, the issue of life, as we mentioned, because the threat of the COVID is still, and now we have, I mean, it's mutating, and now we have this so-called Delta variant that's even more, what do you call this, more contagious, and the symptoms are more severe. So it's something that we have to address in a situation where Indigenous peoples do not have access to health. I mean, if they do have, it's probably very, very poor in terms of medicines, uh, hospitals, care, etc. And of course, the continuing threat of what do you call it, the continuing attacks on Indigenous peoples. And then we've seen, no, the reports continue. We have lost a number of our colleagues, our comrades who have been killed, extrajudicially killed, and we still cry for justice. And we also have to put a stop, no, to all of these killings and attacks as we defend our rights to land. And three will be the issue of freedom. We now have to put into the narrative also a discussion on popularizing the right to self-determination of Indigenous peoples, and the role also and participation and importance of Indigenous peoples in national struggles. No? We are impacted by national policies the same way with the workers, the women, the youth, the LGBT, and all of these sectors are also impacted by this. And we have to be part of this struggle to, to be able to show that we are part of a wider society. At the same time, for other sectors also to be able to participate and give solidarity to our struggles. And it is important to note that when we speak of self-determination, it also speaks of liberation. It also speaks of a struggle against occupation, like what our brothers and sisters in West Papua are experiencing, or the case of occupation by coup or the military junta in Burma. But it also speaks of our fight for freedom against modern day, you know, wherein you have big countries, imperialist countries, hovering, dominating every aspects of our life. So all of this will intertwine. We try to address this, and with our unity, we will win, because definitely what we have learned from decades of struggle since the onset of colonization is that we are able to achieve victories. We are able to win because of unity. Unity on how to look at the problem, and then unity also in our aspirations. In this case, Indigenous people's aspirations for land, life, and freedom.
I totally agree with you on how the struggles of Indigenous peoples, which are happening right now, is again right now. It's happening right now as we talk about it. It's not happening yesterday. It's not happening tomorrow. It's happening right now. Just like you, our viewer. Just a while ago, you were looking at your WhatsApp, waiting for your next information, or you were playing with your Warcraft, or your your entertainment devices in real time. But while you were doing that, the indigenous people struggles continue, and there are crises happening at this very moment, which you may not know about, and which you may not understand. But it has perhaps popped up once in a while, when you read the newspaper, or your parents talk to you about some wars happening, and a military took over a democratically elected government, right? But these are the things that indigenous peoples are facing right now. And the IPMSDL, the Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination, is one organization at the global level which looks and focuses and are the experts in understanding and analyzing the situation on the ground as it happens. So could indigenous voices shape into more of helping all of you understand the situation through the Unite to Win campaign for this month, as actions to celebrate and to express our indigenous ideas and struggles in the month where we celebrate our rights. So what's in store this month of action, Beverly?
Well, we have a variety. I mean, so far, the list it's long already, but it keeps getting longer. There are some of our member organizations who will be doing like concerts, an online concert using traditional and contemporary modern music, no, or maybe a fusion of this. We also have different well, of course, the traditional webinars and discussions. And then we also have offline activities like people, organizations dropping banners that will say that August 9 is the International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples, and these are our rights, and etc. Of course, there are also some who will be doing some online exhibit. This I have to see, haven't seen it yet. Online exhibit of artworks, etc. Some will
Very
also
cool.
be doing it in areas where probably that the quarantine is more relaxed. You can have a face-to-face but limited gathering of indigenous people. So it will be a variety from something like simple poetry to dancing to probably just holding a placard that says respect indigenous people's rights. But we will be posting it in our Facebook. But at the same time, there are certain milestones that we will also like to bring in, no? Not only from August, which is International Day for Indigenous Peoples, but we will also be participating in upcoming international events. Like one would be the Global Peoples Summit this September. Indigenous peoples are very active. We try to bring in indigenous voices there to look into the issue of food production, agricultural production. Definitely, indigenous peoples have a say on this because many of us are also farmers, many of us are peasants. We'll also be trying to participate in the upcoming, what do you call this, climate conference of parties in relation to climate. We'll be doing this online most likely. So we'll have to bring in a very, very strong presence of indigenous peoples on the issue of the climate crisis, climate emergency. We also have different kinds of activities to further develop our capacities as members of civil society. So we'll be coming out with certain trainings. So we would, those are some of the things that we still have on the table.
That is awesome, where the Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination has already lined up programs throughout the whole month of August. And is ongoing, particularly in the participation of member networks of IPMSDL. Yes, you heard me saying that, member network. So let me just give you a very quick rundown. So there are Indigenous peoples organization and communities which have formed their organization and have become a member to the Indigenous peoples movement for self-determination and liberation. But there are those that are not member yet. It doesn't mean that if your organization is not part of IPMSDL, that you won't be getting involved in the program, right?
Mhm.
What I'm saying here is that out of the experiences and the production and the content and the creation of the magazine, creation of the
Mhm.
radio show, creation of the concert, creation of
Mhm.
these Indigenous voices, we will be able to tell you guys the story of what's happening in the world of Indigenous peoples movement and fight and struggle for self-determination. And
Yes.
to be able to do that is you gotta very simply tune in to where the discussion happens. And like Beverly said, we have the Twitter page, we have the email that you can send us any information regarding, hey, what's happening in your organization, what's happening in your community. So email us whenever you want to. The email address is found on this posting and it's found at the bottom of this page. We're going to take a short break and come back with round number 3 for the discussion with Beverly Longan as we talk to you about Indigenous Voices being a platform to interconnect with you during the time of pandemic. Katama Katama will be right back. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Kamusta ka in the Philippines? Kopi Sanangan in Sabah, Malaysia. This is Atama Katama and I have Beverly Longed. And on our first launching episode on Indigenous Voices, we're talking about how you can join in on the celebration of International Day for the World Indigenous Peoples and also participate in programs and activities organized very awesomely by IPMSDL. A while ago, I told you about hashtag Unite to Win. Beverly told you what's gonna happen, what are we going to do, and what contents that we can be able to share. But of course, programs for members of IPMSDL are already ongoing. But if you would like to participate, and if you want to join the celebration, here's what you can do. And to give you some ideas, I have Beverly to tell you how you can participate and how you can join with us. Beverly.
Thanks, Atama. Well, anybody can join. No, this is not exclusive to members or partners of IPMSDL that we know of at the moment. Anybody can join. I mean, if you got to read about us in Facebook, in Twitter, or even through other online information channels, just get in touch with us. And we can see on how we can have future collaborations. Second, you can just send in if you have a video of yourself, a blog about yourself in relation to Indigenous peoples issues and or culture or any other thing about Indigenous peoples. You can also send it to us, and maybe we can also show it in the next episode of Indigenous Voices. Definitely, you can also write, a poem. You can send us a copy of your poem that we can read and we can share with others, and probably we can do what do you call this, a collective reading of the poem. share us a copy of your painting that we can use as backdrops online or offline. I mean, just contact us and we'll see. I mean, the ideas are vast. It's limitless. So we can do a lot of things, but we can start by you getting in touch with us, or if we see you and we think that you have a very good artwork or a song that we think should be shared with us, we can also contact you. So it can work both ways. And then for those who know about Indigenous Voices, for those who know IPMSDL, please share. Please share in your own, what do you call this, personal social media accounts. Share with your friends, share with your family. But there's this IPMSDL a global network, and they have this regular episode of Unite to Win. Maybe we can contribute, maybe we can share, and those are things. So it's limitless. Those are some of the ideas that we have at the moment, but we are also very happy to hear of any suggestions that would make our platform broader, wider, and our activities more participatory, more creative, more accessible. Please do just communicate. Let's start the conversations now.
Yeah, and let me add, let's start making contents also of these conversations. A lot of young people I know in my field of creative and cultural work, they're either doing two things. Number one, watching contents and learning, or either making contents to help people learn. And if you want to be part of this, let me give you a pathway on what you can do. Jump in the website ipmsdl.org, and you will find a campaign kit. Beverly has prepared a toolkit and a what do you call it, how to use or what you can do, or a frequent asked question in form of a campaign kit. So go and get it right now. ipmsdl.org. It's called the campaign kit. So you can use that kit as a guide to creating your contents as often as you want. It's really sad, but at the same time, we are also happy that we have a lot of activities, but it's only online, right? Unlike our previous celebrations where we get to meet face to face at meetings, but it's not just limited to these very powerful meetings where we discuss and we decide together as Indigenous peoples in our regions. These meetings, gatherings also give us other time to love and care for one another, to hang out and to talk and to eat our Indigenous food together, and to celebrate who we are, exchange shirts, exchange items, exchange seeds as well. These are the things that we have been missing over the past 2 years. What's your memories or activities of IPMSDL, so that we can share about it right now, before the pandemic? Bev, I remember hearing about the Igorot people and this huge festival that's celebrated every year, which is the Cordillera People's Day, right? From Kinabalu. Our elders here was like saying, hey, you got to check out this Cordillera People's Day. And at a younger age, I was like, whoa, what is it that they do? And I was Googling it, and it turned out to be, well, in my own words, an awesome tribal gathering, So it was on this idea and a cultural interest that I had, which allowed me to meet you, Beverly, to meet the Cordillera Peoples Alliance, the indigenous organization of the Cordillera people. This is one of many memories that I have in participating in activities at the IPMSDL. What was yours, Beverly? Come on, tell us.
The first time I participated in Cordillera People's Day was when I was in grade 6. At that
Grade
time,
6.
I think that
12
was
years
in,
old?
no, probably younger.
Ah.
At the time, that was not yet Cordillera People's Day. It was still celebrated as McLean Memorial Day because it
Ah.
started to give honor, recognition to the heroism of McLean Dulag, who was killed by government forces in 1981 because of his leadership in the in opposing fighting the World Bank funded project Chico Dam. No, so we come
Right.
there
Yeah.
just in Cordillera Day. So, and then it has grown, no, from a gathering to honor the heroes of Bakliing and the other heroes of the Chico Dam struggle by those that were affected by the dam, directly affected by the dam project. It has now become a regional celebration. So it moves now from different communities, not only those impacted by the Chico Dam. So it has moved in all the provinces of the Cordillera, from Mountain Province to Benguet, Abra, and all of those things. And it's also been now developed into a national event and also an international event because it's one, yes, as I mentioned, it's an activity, an annual gathering to, give honor and recognition of our heroes and martyrs in the Cordillera. Two, it's also political because it's also a time wherein we discuss the issues of the day and come out with how analysis on these issues and the position of the people in the relation to these issues. It's also cultural, as you mentioned, because with different indigenous peoples from different parts of the region, indigenous peoples from different parts of the Philippines, and in many times we would have the opportunity of other indigenous peoples from other parts of the world coming in, like you, like our friends Ogiek and Senwer from Africa, from Latin America, and all of these things. So it also becomes an exchange. So we get to see not only their attires, and we would see like similarities in terms of colors, similarities in terms of designs, but also their dances, their songs, and it's also educational because it's also an opportunity where we are able to not only discuss issues, but we have workshops that will what do you call this teach the younger ones on how to play our gongs and how to use these bamboo instruments, or to a certain extent languages, because it's a time that we are able to also closely interact with elders of the community and elders from other communities. And it's also gastronomical in the sense that we get a taste of indigenous cuisine, no? Not only of how pork is cooked, vegetables are cooked, but we also get the taste of traditional wine, no? These are still being processed. So it's a comprehensive event, and then from one day celebration now it has turned into a 2 to 3 day celebration and gathering, because people travel from far and wide, and then just to bring them for a day, why not expand it so that we can have more conversations, more interactions, and I mean, for me, I've learned a lot in these in these gatherings. No, it also probably made me understand more my indigeneity, my identity as an Igorot, my identity as a Bontok Kankanain in this what do you call this season, not season, in this time wherein we are facing many challenges, not only in relation to land and life, but even our own identities are being attacked or slowly eroded by changes in narratives, revising to history, or what you call this, gain friendships, with different people across the globe. And for our organizations, our communities, they're also able to develop partnerships,
Mm-hmm.
stronger ties with those who have been participating in this.
Mm-hmm. Speaking about stronger ties, IPM SDL, since it was started many years ago, and I think 11 years
11
ago.
years ago.
Well, my experience of cultural exchange, but in the context of really coming together in solidarity and talking about what really matters
Mhm.
at country or at the country that we visit. For example, I remember in 2017, IPMSDL came for the first time to Pontianak, Indonesia,
Yes.
right? And we had a visit to the community, and the community told us about the issues that they're facing, and we also helped the Dayak leaders understand some international
Yes, yes.
perspectives. Apart from just country visits or meetings in these countries, there are also significant campaigns that we take part. I was fortunate to be invited to IPMSDL's activity at the Makabayan, Lakbayan, in the streets of Manila, where
Mhm.
indigenous
Manila Bayan.
peoples, Manila Bayan, yes,
Yes.
where indigenous peoples or international delegations
Mhm.
or travelers, or in some terms today is tourism, came to
Mhm.
Manila and took part in a people's activity and a people's action. And for many of us, it was the first time to see so many people come and take up their civil rights, to protest and to express their freedoms. So I want to just remind all of us that those things happened when before the pandemic. But right now, as the pandemic is blazing on, and there are still no telling signs on when this will end, I think what can help us in Indigenous Voices is to look back at the memories of IPMSDL. And for this, we are moving into our next part, which is the exciting 11 years of IPMSDL. But first, let's watch this video. Yes, that was a cool video from IPMSDL. So do join the movement. Be part of what really matters. If your culture to you means that you must speak about self-determination and liberating any element of your being and your culture, and it's a pride of your people, come and join the movement. We're online. We're here right now to bring us back to the conversation. Let's bring Beverly Longid. So, Beverly,
Yes,
um,
Katama.
it's been 11 years already, it's more than a decade no of IPMSDL work. And IPMSDL is based in Manila, Philippines, and through participation and a lot of cultural immersion and visits to the Philippines, I can also have now the English tone of the Filipino English slang, no? So yes, these are the learnings that we have, and when we expose ourselves in the decade-long work for the IPMSDL. Can you share with everyone how and when IPMSDL started? Give us a 101 on the history of IPMSDL, Bev.
Thanks,
Go.
Atama. Yes, it's been 11 wonderful and challenging years for IPM-SDL. And if we look back to this, we were formed actually during a typhoon. I think it was raining at the time in Baguio. And at the if I remember is that there was a conference in relation to climate change, climate crisis. It's an international conference to address the issue of climate change, climate crisis. And in that conference, participated by more than 100 individuals representing something like 32 countries, but more than around 70 organizations, came out with a resolution. Why don't we set up an international network, an international organization of indigenous peoples that will bring in the issues from the ground, and not only to participate or engage in the United Nations or intergovernmental processes globally, but to come out with coordinated campaigns, look into a common analysis of these issues that indigenous peoples are facing, come out with common research activities. So that was 11 years ago on October 10th, now in Baguio City. And what was also very relevant for me is that that's the first time that I get to meet Celestine Akpobari of the Ogoni people, who is still a member of our International Coordinating Committee of IPMSDL. That was also the first time that we met Jerry Leonard Imbiri of West Papua, who 11 years still is still with us, still an active member of the International Coordinating Committee of IPMSDL, and many others who were there. The third one that I think that we would also like to remember from the founding of IPMSDL was that in that founding was that we also came out with a resolution to declare November 10 as International Indigenous Peoples Heroes Day, because much of our heroes are not recognized, are not known, not only among ourselves, but more so the wider community, the wider public. So we came out with an resolution that every November 10 is International Indigenous Peoples Heroes Day. And this coincides with the death anniversary of the Ogoni martyrs. 9 Ogoni martyrs led by Tensaro Wiwa, who was killed, executed by government forces in Nigeria because of his leadership in the fight of the Ogoni people to defend their territories against Shell. No, so it's something that we're still trying to commemorate and to popularize.
Oh yeah, recently I found some contents online regarding the very issue of Ken Saro-Wiwa and their people's fight against Shell. Let's move on, Bev. So you are the global secretary of this organization. Can you tell the audience when did you come in as the global secretary?
Not secretary I came as the global coordinator, no? And I came in as the global coordinator in 2015. But earlier on, the secretariat of the IPMSDL was through the volunteerism and commitment of the Cordillera Peoples Alliance, because the Cordillera Peoples Alliance was one of the founding members of IPMSDL. And since we were still at its infancy, there was still no resources to speak of, no specific staff for to do IPMSDL work. It was the secretariat of the CPA, Cordillera Peoples Alliance, to focus on. At the time, I was a member and secretariat of the Cordillera Peoples Alliance. But then when the work of IPMSDL gradually grew and expanded, it was already difficult also for CPA to be taking this on, because it has also its own, orientation and mandate. So CPA agreed, and also with me, that why don't we develop a full-time global secretariat dedicated for IPMSDL, and that happened in 2015. So it started with me alone at the start, and then gradually we had increased the number of volunteers and staff for the global secretariat until what we have now. Probably we're starting the conversations now on how do we look into coming out with what do you call this, members of the secretariat that are not necessarily based in Manila. How will we do a better coordination with our growing membership, because we would like to expand also our membership, especially in Africa and Latin America. Maybe there are some of those who would like to help us from those regions. So, I mean, we started with one with no resources, and we're still working on coming out with more resources to support our operations and to do probably give support to some of our partners and members. I think those are the years that I mean, it's memorable because it started with something small, but because of our cooperation, our solidarity, it is what we have now. And then with what we have now, we probably will aim for something bigger, and we'll see.
Those are really significant memories, Bev. A lot of our viewers may not be able to imagine those early days, but you can rewind back to the part where we uploaded and we posted the video of the IPMSDL just a while ago, and try to have a look at how an organization like IPMSDL started and built up, and today supporting various networks all over the world, and also becoming a very important partner at the global level. I'm talking at the global level, of the civil society organizations. A long time ago, civil society or NGO at global didn't have indigenous peoples, right, Bev? They supported indigenous peoples, but indigenous peoples were not on the table together with CSO. And I found myself through IPMSDL attending these civil society engagements and organizations, which also give another very valuable space for our stories to be told. And I am sure over 11 years, there are so much stories to know about. And for that reason, keep tuning in. Come and join us and learn. If you're a student in university, yo, like, IPMSDL, a network which has so much experience, give us a call, give Beverly a call, and let's share information and bring out so many shared conversations. But I am going to take a break right now, and after we come back, what is the biggest challenge ahead, Beverly? The question still remains, the struggle continues. Once you're Iron Man, you're forever Iron Man. Once you are Spider-Man, you're forever Spider-Man. And this is imprinted in the way we are growing, or we have grown up to recognize these heroes. But behind every hero or every story of heroic action, there are the nasty side. So we're gonna come back, and Bev is gonna tell us what are the biggest challenges so far and what is expected to come. This is Indigenous Voices with our launching episode. We'll be right back with Beverly. Stay tuned. For the last part of our launching episode of Indigenous Voices, let's get Beverly back to tell us the biggest challenge of IPMSDL, the past, the present, and the future. We know it's very, very important work, yet there are clear challenges. Tell us about these challenges, Beverly.
Hi, Tama. I think the biggest challenge as of now, no, for IPMSDL and its members is this policy of attacks against indigenous peoples. And I say it's a policy because it is something that governments, it is something that corporations are very conscious about in relation to dealing with indigenous peoples. You know? And the worst thing, the biggest challenge that we're facing now is this vilification and terrorist tagging or terrorist labeling or branding of not only of our leaders, but also of our organizations and our communities. It is because even amidst this intensified repression, this intensified militarization, and these attacks of tagging and everything, red labeling, indigenous peoples still exist and persist and desist, no? And even in this situation of pandemic, we are still able to find our way to be able to organize. We're still finding our way to be able to do mobilizations, whether online, offline, or now they call it a hybrid, a mix of offline and online. And then we're still able to do, information, capacity building, limited, probably in limited way, but we are able to maximize whatever spaces that we have. And this has become also a policy. I mentioned it also as a policy because in many of the countries where indigenous peoples are, or in countries where we find ourselves in, is that governments have also enacted national security laws under the guise of countering terrorism. So the Philippines has an anti-terrorism act. India still has the Special Armed Forces Act, and then I think even Malaysia has its own version of national security law, and this further infringes on the rights of indigenous peoples to organize, to assemble and express their grievances and to call for accountability and to a call for justice. I mean, these are things uh, that we should look into, while at the same time we also try to link this up and address the issue of the worsening economic crisis. So we now
Mhm.
have, politically we are being attacked and everything, and then economically we are facing all of this crisis, and then this also, of course, as we have been talking since day one, would impact negatively on our identity, especially our identity and indigenous value of addressing things collectively. You know,
Mhm.
the value of the common good and solidarity, the indigenous value of life. So this negatively impacts and all of that. So this is something that IPM and its members and partners and indigenous peoples and everybody would need to address and find ways to address it, because government is really, how do you say it, hell-bent in pushing on with its neoliberal policies
Mhm.
of privatization, deregulation, and liberalization. And we will also have to find also ways on how to counter this, because they have
Mhm.
the resources, they have the military, they have the manpower, but we have the rights and we also have the numbers.
Mhm. Yes. We are people. We
Yes.
are indigenous peoples. We are also sovereign. And we
Mhm,
also have our exclusive human rights.
mhm,
And these are instruments which are unalienable to every
mhm,
living human being on this planet, whether the person is of a government or a private company. It's going to be beat down, it's going to boil down to the humanity of it. Where indigenous peoples are concerned,
mhm,
facing these challenges, we are also the most targeted um, peoples when we come together in solidarity and actions and to address and to lift up our voices so that it can be heard. If we are not going to be doing that, no one will pay attention, no changes will happen. Thanks so much, Beverly, for telling us about the challenges. And myself and our colleagues here in Malaysia, as well as Borneo, we are always in constant threat and fear of all these things which you have just mentioned about. But let's now talk about the future. After 11 years, yeah, how do you wish to see IPMSDL continue its existence? You know, in the context today, Jeff Bezos and these
mhm,
super billionaires have gone to space, while we indigenous peoples continue to defend at the very front line
mhm,
our planet Earth. I say this because indigenous peoples really are gifted with the protection to the land, territories, and resources, whereby it is found, this this biodiversity, I mean, is
mhm,
found in 80% of indigenous people's territory. This is definitely something to think about as we
mhm,
move on
mhm.
as a post-COVID civilization based on this historic pandemic. So, Bev, how do we wish to move on with IPM SDL?
Well, thanks, Atama. No, we can always be, and look. I would look forward to a stronger and more active IPM SDL, in different parts of the world, with a more reinvigorated organizations. And I also hope to or I look forward to a more active presence of the youth in the IPMSDL, because in 10 years from now, we'll be 10 years older. And
Yeah.
probably some of us would have gone ahead of us. Either probably they've been, I mean, it can be a various reasons, for old age or sickness. So I really would like to see a more active presence of the youth. And it's something that we and IPMSDL should probably discuss more on how to bring in a more active presence of the youth. But definitely, IPMSDL would remain to exist, as long as the struggle remains. And then what we are fighting for, it's not easy. I mean, and it cannot be achieved overnight or in a year's time or in a month's time. I've been an activist since I was in uh, uh, I was much younger then. No, I've been an activist since I was in high school, and I am now a grandmother. So the realization is that things do not really happen overnight. But it does not mean that within the how many decades of my activism, this one decade of IPMSDL, is that we haven't achieved anything. No, we have achieved many things, and there are many victories. There are many achievements that we need to celebrate on, and at the same time, with these achievements and victories, we need to dare to win more. We need to dare to achieve more. We need to dare to have more, greater, and bigger victories. And that is something that I think all of us in IPMSDL would look into. Pandemic or no pandemic, IPMSDL will be here to exist, not only to protest, not only to develop capacities, but also to forward alternatives, not only for indigenous peoples, but also for the better good of everybody. Because as they say, solidarity, it exists not only between and among indigenous peoples, but I would also like to see a better, a stronger solidarity between and among indigenous peoples and non-indigenous peoples. I mean, a better world is really possible. So let us dare to win and dare to struggle.
Definitely, a better world is possible. And as we strive on a daily basis, from wherever we are in our communities as Indigenous peoples, we are always going to be part of a society of people that has a very different way in our worldview of cosmology, of biodiversity, of culture, and spirituality. And for this to continue, the new generation, the incoming generation, does also complete our indigenous worldview of past, present, and future ancestors, which is one very spiritual and important identity of being an indigenous person, indigenous peoples, and what more, with almost 400 million indigenous peoples on the planet who share the same idea for Pachamama, Mother Earth, conservation, with protocols, with weaving, with colors, with culture, with art, with expression, and most importantly, we have the voice. And indigenous voices is what we are talking about right now. This is our launching episode. This August, IPMSDL will launch Indigenous Voices. It's a 1 hour feature show, and also it's going to be put into small bits and pieces to be able to be put on various social media platforms where we feature web talks that brings indigenous peoples, change makers, influencers, leaders, artists, performers, advocates, and activists to come and share their voices. Different from the usual comprehensive and very thorough webinars, and online discussions that we have had in the past, Indigenous Voices aims to be on the easy listening, easy watching side of online content. If you like this idea, please follow us in our next episode. Be part of our mailing list. Click like and share on this video. Like our IPMSDL Facebook page. Thank you for watching. And I want to say once again, thank you so much, Beverly Longid, Global Coordinator for IPMSDL, joining us on our maiden broadcast of Indigenous Voices all the way from the Philippines. Any last words?
Thank you, Atama, for hosting this first launching episode. At the same time, I would like to thank all of the members of the Global Secretariat and all of those who are listening and participating today. And we hope to see more of you, not only in Indigenous Voices, but in the different activities that IPMSDL will be organizing or co-organizing with other institutions and organizations. So see,
To
join
conclude,
the movement. Don't forget,
yes,
join the movement.
and to conclude, we want to wish all Indigenous peoples, wherever you are in the world, happy celebrating the International World Indigenous Peoples Day celebration, which we celebrate as we have fought and struggled for countless years for the rights of Indigenous peoples to be regarded and to be declared by the international community coming from the United Nations. This is Atama Katama, your host today for the launching episode of Indigenous Voices. Don't forget to join us again on our first episode, coming to you all the way from IPMSDL, Indigenous Voices. Don't forget the hashtag Unite to Win. This month, August, is where we begin. Till I see you again next time. Goodbye from Kutikinabalu. Goodbye from our broadcast center in Manila, Philippines. Till then, long live Indigenous peoples. Long live international
International solidarity.
solidarity. Goodbye for now.